I was struck by what I thought was a shift, not a dramatic maybe, but a shift nonetheless, in your attitude toward technologies. In the early essays, you reference them sometimes in a kind of list of curriculum materials or elements of an environment, but there was a kind of attitude, it seemed to me, of almost, hopefulness might be too strong, but favorable to ed TV and to what technology might be able to offer the teacher in creating more options. But toward the later essays, it seemed to me you became more skeptical and emphasized more the commercialization that was in the media. And so I wanted to ask you, over the course of your career, have you shifted in your thinking about technology?
Well, I don't think that I've shifted, although I think perhaps the changes in the economic political scene might carry with it a shift of, emphasis or something like that. I have, as long as I can remember, I've been heavily influenced by Spengler's The Decline of the West, and I forgot who the American person is that did a critique of technology.
Well, Sherry Turkle is the famous.
No, not her, because she's been deeply engaged in the actual practice of it in Harvard. This was not Lippmann, but one of the other major.
Of that period.
Of that period.
Of that period.
And then there's.
Well, Jacques Ellul.
Jacques Ellul's critique, Heidegger's critique.
Right.
They're all the critiques, but those critiques of technology. I can't think of the one who was writing in the 20s. It wasn't Lippmann, but it was another major commentator. All of them warning about technological problems. But reading the development of books and print is also a technology. So technology is not inherently bad. The economic control of technologies is bad. I remember when Apple first started to be interested in schooling. Wells Fauché was the person at Teachers College who was supposed to be keeping abreast of what was happening in technology. He was the person, incidentally, that introduced the continuous 8mm or audio tape, the cassette. He helped design that. And I remember at Teachers College, it must have been in the 60s someplace, Phil Lang, who was our ed tech person, establishing telephone conversations with school kids in Australia. And there's always been the optimistic side associated with technology. So I'm not anti-technological. Apple invited a group of us educators to their, whatever it was at that time, I don't remember where it was, to look at what Apple was doing in terms of computers and asking how it could be used for schooling. I took a rather pessimistic view at that time, because, and I think rightfully so, because it was indeed a matter of, sort of humdrum skill development at a very low level without really, which I think still happens. It destroys the content in some ways for ulterior ends. Technology as a manifestation of humankind's creative talents, it seems to me, is to be acknowledged as positive. But like all such things, they can fall into, excuse the religious language, into the hands of the devil. And I'm worried today because the consequence of modern technologies is indeed the extreme individualization of people and the breaking of social contacts. To see people walk down the street tuned into themselves rather than tuned into the people or tuned into the environment, I think is dangerous. So I have very mixed feelings about that. Finding out what they really can do educationally, I'm not sure that we've got enough people looking at that. For instance, and I think I did this in one of the essays, I argued, I think I did it in writing, I may not have, that one way of looking at science textbooks is that it is a communication channel between scientists and students. And if that's the case, we can ask what other communication channels can there be? And with modern technology, it is indeed possible for elementary school students to be in contact with science in laboratories rather than by a textbook media. Now that's not being developed. Part of it's not being developed because the scientific community doesn't want to take time to do that. They'd rather make their money writing textbooks. So I think that the possibilities of Skype and the possibilities of telephonic communication and other things create great possibilities for communication. I don't think they're necessarily being capitalized on. So I'm not negative about technology, but like all technologies, they carry with them the dangers of destroying our universe, our social world. Tracking being a case in point. Yeah.
Could I follow up with a couple more? A couple of times during the afternoon you've referenced Amazon, and part of it was the destruction of bookstores. But part of that, it seemed to me, was a critique of the role of serendipity, for lack of a better word, in discovering new titles. That is simply looking at a shelf and choosing something, whereas Amazon requires that you know what you're looking for. Well, you can do categories, but the suggestions then are made. Do you think that the same opportunity for synchronicity or happy accidents?
It could be, but I don't know, because my browsing of bookstores was so different. You know, I would go to sections that I was interested in and pull down a book, and there would be times when I wouldn't look at that book again for another 3 years.
Right.
And then I would find it very useful.
Right. Duration, temporality.
And going, searching for a book, knowing what you were looking for, gets in the way of that serendipitous experience.
Right.
And I think that's also true in terms of closed stacks. I think open stacks are crucial in the library, using simply the card catalog or whatever catalog, requires that you know what you're looking for, which means you're not being met by the other.
So that's the trouble with the search engine, it seems to me.
Yes, it's very convenient, but it also is limited because it is indeed a confirmation of what and who you already are, rather than something else. Which is why I like the New York Review of Books and why I like the New Yorker. I mean, you're hit in the face with stuff that you wouldn't normally think about, and it's good writing, so you're caught into totally different kinds of things.
So that seems to me a fairly devastating criticism of technology. That it shrinks our world.
I think that's true. I'm not sure that that inherently shrinks our world. I grant that at the present time it is being used to shrink our world. But I'm not sure that is a consequence. You know, the automobile also shrunk our world, in that we didn't have to get on trains and buses and meet all these other people.
About the information technology specifically. What about the point of not being confronted by otherness? Maybe more expansively. I mean, isn't there something about presence and the politics of presence that has the capacity for surprise and, I could even say, a prickliness? Yeah. Sometimes the experience gets in your face and makes you rethink. It calls you into question.
Right.
Whereas if you're looking at a screen,
you don't get that confrontation. You can turn it off. Yeah. Oh, no, I agree with you.
So moving curriculum online seems to me a very dangerous.
To the extent that that is the total focus of the education, yes. That doesn't mean that online stuff might not be useful.
as a supplement?
If you are indeed engaged in some kind of interaction with the so-called natural world, and you become curious about it, it could indeed, that the online stuff could be very, very helpful.
Right, right.
If that is seen as replacing the confrontation with the real world, that's a mistake. That's a mistake, yeah.
Thank you. Finally then, you never, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm mistaken, you've never actually referenced Heidegger's The Question Concerning Technology.
No, that's because my use of Heidegger was basically in terms of language, and at that particular time it was Being and Time and his early essays on language, poetry, and things of that kind that turned me on. I'm aware of that essay and its power, but I think I was warned about technology by Lou and Mumford was the person I was trying to think of.
Louis Mumford.
Yeah, it was the guy that I was trying to think of. Warned about that by Lou and Mumford. I didn't need Heidegger to warn me of that.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, I think Lou's
Yes.
critique of technology is powerful.
Very
Yeah,
powerful.
and I think perhaps there might be places in Marcuse where you'd find the same kind of critique. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
One of Marcuse's students, by the way, teaches at Simon Fraser in Vancouver, Andrew Feenberg, and he attempts to rescue technology, and he got his degree with Marcuse, and he's still trying to rescue technology in the shadow of Marcuse's critique.
Yeah, well, I agree the technological world is worrisome. No. But, so the automobile has also destroyed the environment,
I'm happy to complain about the automobile too.
Yeah, yeah. And certainly the airplanes are not necessarily contributing to a
No.
carbon-free environment,
No, that's right.
but it's very convenient.
Right.
Otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Right, we wouldn't, would we? It would have taken a while
Yeah.
to walk. So,
Do you think you can have experience outside of language, looking at the mystical?
Oh yeah, I don't have any question about that.
You have no question?
I don't think that experience is necessarily mediated by language. I think language becomes one of the mediators, one of the mediating, whatever you want to call it. Yes, but no, this is one of the reasons that Langer was so important for me in my earliest years. I mean, she and Tillich helped, but Eckhart also helped. Eckhart's focus upon experience and I don't know if he labels it spiritual experience, but the fact that there is indeed dimensions of reality that cannot be mediated by language or even mediated by symbols. I don't have any question about that. Yeah. And that's so true in terms of all of the mystical literature in all traditions, whether it's Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or what have you. There's just no question about it. And one of my favorite little books is Suzuki's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I think it's very powerful in terms of any of our habits or habitual ways of doing things blocks other possible experiences. And absolute openness, or in Suzuki's terms, the beginner's mind is crucial if one is going to meet the world in a formative way. Yeah. So language is important simply because that tends to be the primary media within schools and within most educational situations. I remember being heavily influenced by Buber. I remember once when I was despondent in my first years of college teaching at Northern Illinois, ending up in a park someplace, hugging a tree, you know. I have no idea what was behind that, but I recall that very well. Yeah.
Escape from language, perhaps?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, well, you know, Heidegger says language is the most dangerous of possessions, and it is, but it's a very important one, and one which requires a historical consciousness. Are you aware of where your words come from? Are you aware of where your language forms come from?
And how they structure your apprehension.
That's right, yeah, so.
So you referenced the Kennedy reform, the national curriculum reform movement of the early '60s. While we were,
I think Bruner's stuff in terms of his social studies and the stuff that he was doing. I remember when what was the first book that came out?
Process of Education.
Yeah, I remember when that came out.
Theory of Instruction.
Yeah, the Process of Education was a very significant book.
Pretty psychological.
No, pretty significant. Well, psychological, yes, but still very significant,
Very significant.
in terms of what was going on. There's no question about
He
that.
was kind of the education theorist, really, of the national curriculum.
Yeah.
You can teach anything to anybody at any level if you.
Yeah, well, that got all messed up along with
Everything else.
The distortion of Piaget and.
But my question is, if you were in fact looked upon it favorably then, because you were again striking out on quite a unique path. I mean, you were doing your first Heidegger piece comes out, I think, in '62. You don't.
No, my first Heidegger piece had come out in '62.
It's later.
It has to be later because I don't think I really got at it. I might have been referencing it because I kept running into Heidegger's name in the '60s, but I don't think it was until I really spent a year studying it, and then I did the paper with Heidegger's translator at the Union, someplace another.
In any case, there's not much evidence in the early papers of being mesmerized by the national curriculum reform.
No.
So you weren't, in fact.
No, I don't think I was mesmerized by it. I think Bruner's work was very important in terms of.
You don't reference it much.
No, well, because he wasn't so much conceptually helpful in terms of thinking about curriculum. He was helpful in terms of sort of breaking some stereotypes, it seems to me. And for instance, his social studies curriculum didn't work.
Are you talking about the Makos thing, the Mana Course of Study?
Yeah, but it was interesting material. Not that it worked, but it was.
Well, and it caused great backlash.
Yeah, it sure as hell did. Yeah.
He introduced this anthropologically structured, I guess.
Yeah, well, the fact that he had these poor Eskimo people going off and dying by themselves really upset people. Really.
Children shouldn't learn that.
Yeah, children shouldn't learn about death, right?
Yeah.
And the various traditions of death, right? Yeah. But no, I never made him a focus.
No, you didn't.
But I didn't make many curriculum developments a focus of my thought.
You acknowledged them in passing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I remember when I remember, referring to the talking typewriter, which.
Right. A number of times, actually.
Yeah.
You seemed pretty interested in it.
Well, was it really interesting?
Yeah.
It really was.
All right, I'll take your word for it.
It was an interesting way of trying to teach reading and writing. It didn't work.
Right.
Because it was being investigated in New Haven, not in connection with Yale, although there might have been some Yale people involved in it. But it was going on at one of the private schools just north of New Haven.
Really?
The talking typewriter.
Huh.
Robbie McClintock.
Yes, I don't know him, but I.
You know the name, yeah. You know his work. He was the first one at Teachers College to bring in word processing. We would gather in his office, and he had a console that was about the size of that desk.
What year might this have been?
I don't remember. I have no idea. And we were just amazed as he would compose on this machine, and it would print out this stuff. It was fabulous. But the machine was, again, as big as that
The
then.
size of that, yeah.
Yeah, just amazing. And he was the first one, which was his basic interest in technology. Yeah. Well, I'm not. Although I remember the last conference of yours that I attended, where I did the thing on Ricoeur and reading, which I thought was a really interesting thing, and it turned off everybody, including Steve.
Really?
And I said, why are, made some comment about why, and Steve said, well, what are they, listen to what they're talking about, Dwayne, and you're not dealing with what the problems are in schools. You're absolutely right, Steve. And I had been close to Steve. Jim and I both were close to Steve for a while. That was a sad development, really sad. That we did not support him at
New Mexico.
well, first of all, at Johns Hopkins.
Right, and then he got fired from.
Yeah, and that we broke contact with him, and I don't remember when he
broke contact, I think, with everybody.
I think he probably did.
Yeah.
Well, and he was taking such a strong Marxist view at that time too. Yeah, he really went out. Yeah, because he was bright. My sabbatical year at Wisconsin was when Steve was still a student.
Really?
And that's how I got to know Steve. Yeah.
The work on student rights, which you've referenced a number of times, is so important, but I think his work on the concept of curriculum criticism is so interesting, and I took very much to heart. Did that paper of mine on Ricoeur and reading? I think, we'll have to see if we have that. It's not.
Well, it's not that one. It's the one I did in Tennessee on student rights, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, I have that.
Yeah. I presented that in Tennessee, and Steve Selden invited me down. And one of the university administrators, I don't know what the other papers were like. He said, that's one of the most dangerous papers I've ever heard.
That's a great compliment.
Oh, jeez.
That could be among the candidates for the next volume of Collected Essays.
Oh, gosh.